We live in countries named by colonizers. What do you think makes harder for us to really understand about our identity?
I think that the story of African Americans, because it's never been placed at the center of the American narrative, so much about the history of Americans that we don't know, that the mainstream doesn't know, right? Unless you take a Black studies class. But in my opinion, it should be part of mainstream history. I'll tell you what happened when the first time, the only time I've been to Brazil. I was very interested in Afro-Brazilians because I have known for a long time that there are very strong connections between Nigeria and Brazil. And what surprised me was how I just didn't see many Black Brazilians. And so I asked somebody and I said, where are they? What I started to realize is that the mainstream story that Brazil tells itself about what it is does not place Blackness as part of its center, right? So I think that the ideas of mestizo and everyone's mixed, but actually Africanness that I think is such a part of Brazil isn't really in the mainstream. I still want to learn a lot about that. And in the same way, in other parts of South America, I think, there are very strong African histories that are just not known about because they're not placed at the center of the narrative of these countries. And I think it's really just because, colonization comes with power, and power is very much a part of storytelling. If you have the power, your story gets told. And so I think for people who are part of marginalized groups, you have to make the effort on your own to learn your history. And obviously it's more difficult, but you have to do it because it's important.
Yeah. Okay. Vambara. Boy. Yeah. Vambara.
Your books, Americana and We Should All Be Feminists, are big here in Brazil. Could you please talk about those books?
So We Should All Be Feminists actually is a talk that I gave, a TED talk. I've been a feminist for as long as I remember. And by that, I mean that I've always known that women were not given the same privileges and opportunities that men are given. I knew that from the time I was 6 years old, because you don't need to read a book. You just look around the world and you see that women are not being treated as fairly as men. And so I wanted to talk about it, but I wanted to talk about it in a way that's very accessible. And I wanted to use my own life experiences as examples. I didn't want to talk about it as an academic theory. For me, I want to give people the language to talk about what they already know, because women already know these things. I'm not telling them anything new. But also I was hoping that men would also, read it or listen to talk, and maybe that they would start to understand, but it's not enough to understand. It's about when you understand, then what do you want to do about it? Because for me, feminism is about trying to make a change in the world, even if it's a very small change towards equality for men and women. And Americana is kind of a book that I laughed a lot when I was writing it because, I had fun writing Americana. I had lived in the US for a number of years and I wanted to write particularly about race. And the reason I wanted to write about race is that growing up in Nigeria, I didn't think of myself as Black because almost everybody is Black. Then when I got to the US, suddenly I was Black. But that's not even the problem. What I realized that being Black in America often meant very negative things. People just assumed that you were not intelligent because you were Black. And for me, coming from Nigeria, it was really difficult to, understand. So I started reading a lot about African American history just to educate myself. And I started observing things. And so when I wrote Americana, I wrote about race in a way that I hadn't seen about, in a way that's very honest. And also kind of funny. I mean, the thing about racism is that racism is so absurd and so stupid. When you think, for example, there are people in the US who, because they did not want Black people to swim, so they too would not swim. I mean, when you think about that kind of thing, it's just so stupid. Right? But really, I wanted Americana also, hopefully, to start conversations. I think race is a subject that's really difficult for many people to talk about. And I think when you have a novel, sometimes it gives you an entry into talking about difficult subjects. I should also specify that when I say racism, I'm talking about anti-Black racism, because obviously there are different kinds of racism. And it's Black people experience racism, Asian people experience racism, Hispanic people experience racism. But the racism that I'm talking about is anti-Black racism.
E aí ele nasce e cai no chão.
É o grande Otelo, né?
É.
Mas o pai é a mãe dele?
Não, a mãe é a mãe, mas é um homem.
Não entendi.
É simbologia.
Mas parece coisa de cavalo marinho.
Simbologia.